Hello everyone and welcome to North Melbourne's member Q&A presented by the Spirit of Tasmania. My name is Nat Edwards and I'm joined by North Melbourne senior coach Alastair Clarkson and footy boss Todd Viney. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Nat.
Thanks, Nat.
Are you ready for some questions from the fans?
Yeah, let's
open it up. Let's go for it.
Okay, we're going to go for it. The first one is from Martin Brooks. And of course, thank you to everyone who has sent us your questions. We do really appreciate you taking the time. Martin wants to know, are we where you thought we'd be as a club right now? And if not, what are you going to do to bring us back up to standard? Clarko, I might start with you with that one.
Yeah, well, we knew that when we came into the club, 18 months ago, that our footy club needed to fix itself up in terms of our culture and our environment, and ultimately, unless you get the administration and governance of the club and the key positions in the club really, really stable, that's really, really difficult to have success. So that's really been our most significant focus over the last little while. And we feel like that started to correct itself, with Jen Mott's coming as a CEO, Todd as the footy manager, myself as the coach, Sonia as the chairperson, and then Luke and Jai as the captains. Now, would we like that to have materialised into more wins at this point in time? Yes, but we know that part of the club is really, really stable now, and now we've all got a plan on where we want to go and what we've got to do. And we just got to stick to that plan as best we can and know that the longevity of that was what will produce success.
I mean, you've both been around clubs for a long time, different clubs. Todd, in your experience too, how long does it usually take to, embed a new culture around the club and change things, especially given Clarko's only come in the last sort of year or so?
Yeah, no, well, it's a tough job. This is an elite competition. This is the leading competition in Australia, really, with the most depth. All the clubs are looking to try and do the same thing. And we know through experience, whether it be the Hawthorn experience that Clarko and I went through early days, into my recent experience with Melbourne, going through a rebuild, and we're lucky enough to have guys in our coaching department, in Jed Adcock, who went through the whole Brisbane experience as well when they were right where we are now, and then they've been a real power club for the last 4 years. So he's been part of that journey, and Xavier Clark through the Richmond experience. So we've got a fair experience of guys who've been through that rebuild. It's not easy. It does test the patience, and sometimes we understand the frustration of our supporters along that journey, but nothing can be rushed, and the decisions you make are really important. That you're thinking about the long term, and we talk about contending for silverware, and all the decisions we make now and building our list are around contending for silverware. There's no shortcutting of decisions, and sometimes the decisions we make are in the short term hard, and we're probably experiencing some of that right now, but we've got alignment, as Clarko was referring to, within key senior people within the club, which is without it you can't go anywhere. And now we're working on our culture and environment, which we think we've done a lot of work in 18 months, which the outside world doesn't see a lot of that, but internally, it's a good place to come to work. Everyone's rolling the sleeves up to get better. We want to get there quicker rather than waiting, but we've just got to do our time, do the hard yards, and that's what we're seeing right at the moment. But we're committed, and we've got a plan, and we've got to stay the course.
Clarko, you've obviously done it before at Hawthorn, and Todd mentioned that. I mean, what lessons did you take from that time in the rebuild there that you're sort of taking into this?
Yeah, well, it's really hard because some of that decision making, whether it was at Hawthorn, whether it was at Melbourne, I'm sure it happened with Todd there too. We just played an opponent on the weekend, Adelaide, 2 or 3 years ago. The Adelaide supporters nearly tearing down Adelaide Oval, because of their frustration that their side shouldn't be better. But then, bit by bit, their players mature a little bit with 20, 30, 40, 50 games under their belt over the last 2 or 3 years, and they get some players from other clubs like Dawson and Rankin, who are now 2 of their best players. So we need to continue to explore how we can bring talent into our footy club. But some of the tough decisions, I remember when I first arrived at Hawthorn, there was a first round draft pick called Luke Brendan who hadn't played much footy and just needed some exposure to see if he could go on and play the game. And there was a guy called Mark Graham, Hebe Graham, who'd been a great stalwart of the footy club for a long period of time, but he just happened to fall out of contract at the end of 2004. And our decision making wasn't best for 2005 or 2006. Our decision making is we've just got to create opportunity. So it's similar sort of here with the decision around, will we give Goldie an extra year on his contract, or we provide opportunity for Big X to get that chance? Because ultimately, if we're going to contend for silverware, it was more than likely that it was going to be Big X that would be our first ruck rather than Goldie. And Goldie gets an opportunity in another club to maybe they're at a different period of their development than what we are. They're probably 2 or 3 years ahead of us in terms of the drafting of their kids and that sort of stuff. So they're really, really tough decisions to make, because in a lot of instances you're talking about really, really decorated servants of your footy club. You're talking about experienced wise heads that have played a lot of footy as opposed to youth and young guys that just need to learn the pathway and learn what it's all about AFL footy, and that's a tough road to tread. But we knew that going in. Part of it is what excites us. We look at the weekend's game against Adelaide, and just look at 2 kids in McKercher and Dersma, and the exciting games that they had. Ders was involved in 5 of our goals, kicked 2 himself, and McKercher, had 32 touches, and a little milestone game for him, albeit not milestone in terms of 50 games or 100 games, but milestone in terms of what he's capable of achieving in a game. And now he's got greater aspiration to go and repeat that type of performance. I still recall the first day that Buddy kicked 6 goals in a game against Richmond down at Launceston. Up until then, he just wanted to kick 1 or 2 goals a game, but as soon as he kicked 6, it's just like, this is what I'm capable of doing in the game now. So it's not that he's going to kick 6 every week, but his expectation of himself is higher. But unless they get that opportunity, they're not going to progress at the level. And it's tough yards. And so what we ask our supporters is enjoy those moments. We would love to be enjoying the moments of victories, but enjoy the moments within games of seeing that some of these players emerge. The Paul Curtises emerge, the Tom Powers, the Tristan Xerri, and Charlie Comben, and these sorts of guys. The McKerchers and the Wardlaws and the Sheasels, and just bit by bit as they get more experience and exposure to AFL footy, then will mature and grow as a group.
You've got to take the small wins while you can. The next question is from Carl Ellis, who's in Yarraville. With our current game plan, which teams or elements of how other teams play are we trying to emulate? At the moment, it's really hard to see as a supporter what's our DNA and how are we going to get better, apart from natural development, which isn't enough.
Yeah, well, that's probably a question for me more so than Todd, but the bizarre part about AFL footy now is 18 teams are trying to play a pretty similar brand of football.
Tough, isn't it?
It's not, I can recall, 20 years ago when, a Pagan and a Blight had a very, very different philosophical view on how the game should be played compared to, say, Mick Malthouse. And so both could be successful, and both are really important about how you taught your players that. But now a lot of the coaches are trying to coach the game the same way. It's just like, who's got the experience and the talent to be able to execute it consistently? And right now, because we've got such a young group, we can do it in bits of games, but we just find it really, really hard to sustain over a long period of time, particularly the stuff around the contest. On the weekend against Adelaide, we're beaten for aerial supremacy, both behind the ball and in front of the ball. If we kicked it inside our 50, they marked it too many times. If it was kicked inside their 50, they marked it too many times. And some of that is just learning. Our back end, for instance, I've got Charlie Comben that's played in defence. I think he's played 4 or 5 games back there. Biggie Nguyen's played 4 games in defence for our footy club. These McKercher's playing back there. So some of it is just synergy and they're going to make plenty of errors, and it frustrates us. I'm sure the fans are frustrated. It frustrates us as coaches, and the players get frustrated too. But by and large, the DNA in how we play gets lost a little bit because it looks like we're just not capable of doing things on a consistent basis. But that will get better with time.
And I think, saying that, I float between meetings, our forward group, our midfield group, and defence. And I only said this morning, like, there was some forward highlights from the weekend. Now, we didn't play really well, but there was enough evidence for me to say that looks right. When I watch the top 4 teams or the teams that are playing really well, I see similar stuff. And I said to the group, I'm seeing evidence of us doing all the things that those top needs, and the way they move and contest. But yeah, we don't sing it long enough. And so that's the challenge for us, is to get the youngest, most experienced list to try and do that when we're playing at home, when we're playing away, when we're playing the oldest team or the youngest team in the wet or in the dry. That's what we've got to try and do. In my time, that's the hardest thing. The environment, the culture is a work in progress, but the hardest thing to teach is that game plan and get that consistency to really compete against the good teams. And I sometimes laugh when people say, what's game plan B and C? Because if you knew how hard it was to get game plan A, then you wouldn't talk about B and C. So in my time, yeah, it is slow at the moment, but all of a sudden, bit by bit, it will click.
Our next question is about leadership, and maybe Todd, you can answer this one. As a supporter, I don't see a lot of evidence of leadership on the field. Is there an issue, and how do you address it? That's from Katrina Bradfield in Adelaide.
Yeah, leadership is a key part of successful teams and clubs. I think across the board, we'd like to, the first part about leadership is playing well, leading from the front on the field. So we'd like to see a little bit more better performance across our older guys. And I'm not deliberately putting the heat on them, but if McKercher and Sheasel and Wardlaw and those young guys coming in Dersmo, they need those guys to hold the fort. So we'd like them to be playing better. They want to be playing better. We have lots of conversations around that in our leadership meetings, and they've well and truly recognised that they want to be playing better, and that will come. We've just got to keep turning up to prepare and to get better, and the form will turn around. So that's one part of it. We spend a lot of time talking about leadership. We've got Ray McLean from Leading Teams, who's probably the most experienced leadership provider in the country. Really, he's worked with the Australian Test team when they were successful, the Australian Diamonds in netball, the Sydney Swans, recognised as one of the great cultures. He's worked at Geelong. And we've got him solely to ourselves, so he's running a really good high performance program around leadership. Our guys are investing time in it. We make time in our program to try and get better at it. So it's all coming. They're doing a power of work, the leadership group and the next layer down, about trying to keep driving the standards and behaviours and drive Clarko's message. But they are learning, they are getting better. But we're spending a lot of time, a lot of money on recognising that is a key part of where we need to go. But they are young and inexperienced, and some of them haven't seen a lot of success. So getting up to speed and looking outside of North Melbourne at what elite leadership looks like, so they can impart all that to us.
Luke McDonald said after the game that he felt that as a leader of the club and co-captain, he needed to stand up as well, as do others. Clarko, from your point of view, how do you go about supporting the co-captains in this? Because there is a lot on their shoulders as well, and they want to be playing well, but they're also worrying about their teammates and trying to bring them along too. How do you support the co-captains in that?
Yeah, well, it's difficult because, as Todd mentioned, the first thing that they can do is just, Craig Bellamy at the Storm, he's a very, very simple mantra with leadership. It's just play well on a Saturday.
If only it was that easy.
Yeah. But to be fair, that's the thing that they control the easiest, because they've been doing that since they were 5 or 6 years of age playing the game. So, and they've risen to leadership status of our football club. With some behaviours and actions that they perform off the field, but by and large, why they've been selected as captains of our club is because of their behaviours and actions on the field, and so that's what they know, and so it's just trying to. But we're trying to in a whole heap of different areas of the ground, teach them the roles that we want them to play, and that doesn't matter if you're a young player or an old player, an experienced player, and some is just taking some adjusting to, and as they go through that process too, they will improve their performance. But just at the moment, because it's like when you first drive a car and you got your mum and dad in the car teaching you how to drive, and just everything just seems so clunky when they say change the gears, and it's just like, oh, hang on, I've got to put the clutch in first, and then change the gears, and it just doesn't seem to. Everything seems clunky, and that's a little bit like the way that we're playing our footy at the moment. It's just like, we'll get one part of it right, but then the smooth transition to the next part of it will look, we'll make an error, or someone won't be in the right spot, and so a lot of footy now is around the discipline of the roles to play, and getting the coordination of all those 18 roles at the one time is enormously difficult. And the more experienced you are, and the more footy that you've played, and particularly together as a group, the greater opportunity you've got of having success, and it will come, I'm sure.
Sail with Spirit of Tasmania this season to go into the draw to win 2 tickets to the 2024 Toyota AFL Grand Final and 2 tickets to the Drinkwise North Melbourne Grand Final Breakfast. Sail on board Spirit of Tasmania before August 31 to automatically go into the draw. T&Cs apply. The next question is from James in Cremorne. He says, we got rid of Goldie, Zeebs, Cunners and other mature players last year without replacing their maturity. Did we make a mistake in making our list so young? Who wants to take that one?
Well, I'll take that one. It's, at certain stages players have to retire. They can't keep going. So Goldie's continuing to go. I think he's 36 or 37. And he wants to keep going on. As Clark mentioned earlier, we need to give Tristan Cherry an opportunity to be the number 1 ruck, and he's been probably one of our shining lights this year. Zeeb's retired, Cunner's retired after a battle with well-documented, health battles. Aaron Hall retires, and then we go into another list of players. We probably, Ben Mackay left through that free agency piece. Which we didn't, that's a guy that's probably put in the hard yards. We're, hurting at the moment because of our tall defenders and experience down back. So that's one that he decided to leave. And then there was some guys that left: Aidan Bonner, Jack Marnie, Flynn Perez, another Kane Turner, who's an older guy. So they were guys that we thought we needed to create opportunity. We end up with some really 5 first-round picks. We need to create some space for those guys. We did bring in some players that were ready to play, and that's been Zach Fisher and Dylan Stevens that had been at the clubs. And we recognise we just can't improve our list through the draft. We've got to look at all mechanisms of that. So that's going to be draft, free agency, trade, international. We're looking at all options, but there's no shortcutting. We need to, while we can, bring in some high-end talent, because it's going to become a time and place in a few years' time when Tasmania comes in that you're not. I would suggest if you're trying to rebuild, then
it's going to be tricky.
It's going to be tricky. They're going to get a lot of access to the talent. So, we've got to bring in some talent right now, and we've got to get the mix of talent with some smart trades, some smart back-end picks, rookies, for it to fill out our list, but it's not easy, and we are young. There's no questioning that, but if we're going to be young, probably now's the time to be young, not in a few years' time.
Which probably leads perfectly into the next question, which is from Jordan from Melbourne. How important is it to bring in high-end talent as opposed to building a game style and structure that is effective? So, we obviously know that there's a lot of high-end talent on this list, Clarko, but, balancing that with the game style and building that in the structure.
Yeah, well, they coexist, both those things, and you can bring in talent, but then the talent needs to fit in nicely with the system. So that just takes a little bit of time work out. Just because Colby McKercher plays well on the weekend and has 32 touches doesn't guarantee that we're going to win a game of footy. Because once again, you got to have 18 pieces that are on the ground at any one time, all in perfect synergy with one another, and that's the challenge. It's the most combative ball sport in the world. But our investment was always going to be in the youth of this footy club to grow together, develop synergies together about how they play the game, allow their talents to come to the fore in the roles that they can play, and then see where it goes from there. And our view of watching AFL footy over the last 25 years, that's the best chance you've had of having a period of sustained success once you can get there. But we're very much in the embryonic stages of that.
So you get the young list together and then you probably want to become a destination club. And that's the next question from Sarah Gipton from Victoria. What do we need to do, apart from win, to make North a destination club rather than a departure club? Despite moderate success in the mid-2010s, we haven't been able to retain and attract elite players. Why not? And I think probably as part of that conversation is Luke Davies-Uniacke and Cam Zurhaar, contract situations as well. I guess what Sarah's asking is, how do we stop players from leaving?
Well, I think we're on the way to doing that. We came into the club and said, like, our environment and culture has got to be one where players feel like they want to come to work, they enjoy the environment. They feel like they're getting developed and they're getting opportunities to become the best version of themselves. So I think we're well on our way within that. And then the next part of that is creating, winning teams. And so that's the journey. The opportunity players will come when they see they're going to get an opportunity. They're going to get developed to the best of their ability. And they're going to be playing in finals and hopefully winning premierships. So that's what we're now trying to build, and that will come, whether that be Melbourne early days, struggled to attract some players to come to the club. There was a sort of a limited market where player agents and players wanted to come, but all of a sudden they played in a prelim final after a period of time in 2008, and then they get Jake Lever, and not long after they get Stephen May, which rounded out their list. And Hawthorn has been the same. But let's create the environment, the cultural piece. Then the success is coming, and then players will want to say, I want to be playing in successful teams, and they will come to North Melbourne. We want to be top 4 over a period of time to be able to keep challenging, and pinch one every now and again.
Well, this next question comes from Ben Malone from Melbourne, and it's about an article that Mick McGuan wrote in the paper recently. He's asked if you can respond to the recent media article from Mick regarding North's lack of training standards and effort. What has been done to ensure an AFL level of effort in training and matches is achieved? And I guess Mick sort of said, there's an acceptance of poor training standards at North Melbourne. I'm keen to get your response to that, Clarko.
Yeah, well, I'd say the bottom teams on the ladder are always easy targets, aren't they? And they're bottom of the ladder for a reason, and Mick's probably right. The standards of our group are not at the level that they need to be, and that's what we're aspiring to do. That's why we brought in new players, new coaches, to try to resurrect that. Now we've embarked on this pathway of investing in youth, of acknowledging that that's going to come with some bumpy roads on that path, and part of it will be lifting our standards, because if we were training unbelievably well, I think that would be reflected in winning games of football on a weekend. And so it doesn't surprise me one little bit that that someone would come and observe your training and say, I don't think the standards are good enough, because that's why we're sitting in the position on the ladder that we are right now. And our challenge is, how can we lift those standards in our training? How can we lift our standards in our games? How can we lift our standards in our environment and everything that we do with the game? Because a reflection of that will be a rise up the ladder. Now, we just know we've been involved in this game for a long period of time, and it's just like, yeah, you're a little bit of an easy target because you're somewhere down the bottom. But a couple of years ago it was Adelaide, and 20 years ago it was Hawthorn, and 12 years ago it was Melbourne. And I think there's some growth in all of our players, including some of our leaders, because the bottom line with a lot of these guys, that if they've played 60, 80, 100 games of footy at this club to this point in time, they've only won 15 or 20 games in all of that time. So they don't know what they don't know. When I first arrived at Hawthorn, it was exactly the same thing. They needed to lift the standards. That was both in the way that they prepared and the way that they played the game. But I can remember getting smashed on the footy show for, it doesn't look like your team's got any idea. We look rudderless. No direction. What's your DNA? All exactly the same questions that we're getting now. We just need a bit of patience and some time to actually embed some of these things that we're doing, and we'll see some productivity.
We're an impatient lot in the media and, of course, fans. The last question is from Luke Betton in Melbourne, and thank you, Luke, and to everyone for contributing. Todd, this one maybe you can answer. When will North win a game?
Yeah, well, I think for the last 20 minutes we've been talking about the process and trying to get more consistency across the board on everything we do. So whether it's our training standards, whether it's execution of the game plan, we're seeing evidence, and we've played some tough games against some really good opposition. They're going to be really at the pointy end of the competition this year. And we've played some good footy in that, and where we've scored and we've done some really positive things. So we'll win when we can make a bigger contribution in executing that for longer in games. Now that might be this week. It might be the week after. We don't know exactly, but we do know that we've got to continue to roll up to do the work and just execute the game plan. Clarko and the coaches have got a really solid game plan that's not too dissimilar to the best in the league. Some slight differences, we think, but we've got to make sure they can do it for a long period of time, and we're working our asses off to try and get that done. So I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later, but we are going to see more than one win.
Well, I'm sure all the members appreciate both of you answering some of their questions, and thank you to everyone who contributed. Best of luck at the weekend, and hopefully a win for North Melbourne isn't too far around the corner for all of those loyal fans out there. Thank you so much for joining us on North Melbourne's member Q&A presented by Spirit of Tasmania. We'll see you again soon.